There's no doubt that many different cultures exist all around the world. However, some indigenous tribes may have customs that are pretty scary for outsiders, especially those isolated from us. And that's exactly what you're going to see today. So go ahead and leave your like, click that subscribe button down below, and let's go. Some of the most isolated tribes in the entire world are found in Brazil, specifically in the state of Rondônia, mainly in forested areas near the Uru-Iuauau indigenous territory, which is close to the border with Bolivia. These groups are known as isolated because they actively avoid any kind of contact with the outside world. They live completely independently, hunting for food, gathering resources, and constantly moving through the jungle. Since they have never interacted with outsiders, any sort of approach can be seen as a serious threat. Without understanding who is arriving, they immediately react to protect themselves. There is also the major risk of diseases. A simple contact can introduce common viruses to these groups who have absolutely no immunity, and it was exactly this scenario that led to a really notable incident in 2020. The indigenous Rieli Franciscado, who was 56 years old, went into the forest in Rondônia to try preventing conflicts between locals and one of these groups, known as the isolated people of the limestone region. He had more than 30 years of experience and worked specifically to protect those vulnerable populations. Even so, the contact went terribly wrong. During the approach, he was hit by an arrow and did not survive. When two completely different worlds meet each other like that, the outcome can unfortunately be extremely violent. The Asmat people of Western Papua are among the most feared indigenous groups on the entire planet, both because of their rituals involving cannibalism and because they live isolated from the rest of the world. They reside in the southwestern part of the island of New Guinea, in a region surrounded by mountains to the north and the Arafura Sea to the south. Access is extremely difficult with a hot, humid climate and frequent storms. This has helped keep their culture practically intact for centuries. Over there, life is simple and communal. Nobody lives alone. Families share large houses raised on stilts, and everything obtained from hunting, fishing, or gathering is shared collectively. The women take care of the food while the men protect the territory. But what really caught the world's attention was their ancient reputation. The Asmat were once known for practices of cannibalism and headhunting. Within their culture, this had a deep spiritual meaning. Someone's death needed to be compensated, and rituals were performed to appease the spirits. Today, these practices are almost entirely gone, but the rituals remain strong. Carved objects, ceremonies, and symbolic hunts are still part of their daily routine. Despite controversies suggesting they still engage in such rituals, it seems that nowadays they have left cannibalism behind. In southern Ethiopia, in the Omo Valley, lives a people that many consider one of the most intimidating in all of Africa. The Mursi essentially hide themselves hundreds of kilometers away from any urban areas, preserving ancient customs to this very day. One of their most well-known traits are the lip plates worn by the women. They begin when they are still young, around 7 years old, by removing their lower teeth, and gradually increase the size of the plate until they reach adulthood. Within Mursi culture, the larger the plate, the greater the status and the beauty. But that's not the only thing that draws attention. The Mursi also make marks on their bodies as a way of recording personal achievements. Some of these scars are connected to conquests and tests of strength that they have overcome within the community. Perhaps the custom that causes the most shock is the consumption of cattle blood. They don't kill the animal, but extract a small quantity and use it as food. This is quite common in their daily routine. Furthermore, this group is extremely territorial. Conflicts with other tribes happen, mainly over disputes involving land and livestock. Many men go around armed, taking on the role of protecting the village. It is a way of life very different from ours, and for those who arrive without understanding these rules, the experience can spiral completely out of control. In the mountains of Simbu Province in Papua New Guinea, there's a group that really stands out, called the Skeleton Tribe. The name comes from a very striking visual tradition of painting their own bodies to look like skeletons, but this didn't start for aesthetic reasons. According to local tradition, it all began with an ancient story. Hunters from the village supposedly went into the mountains and never returned. When others went to investigate, they found signs of something strange near a cave. The explanation, passed down through generations, speaks of a monster that attacked anyone who entered it. The solution they came up with was simple and yet curious at the same time. They decided to paint themselves as skeletons to camouflage themselves and be able to face this threat, and the tradition stuck. Today, this painting has become part of the group's identity. They put on performances usually early in the morning or at the end of the day, recreating this legend for visitors. Even though it's cultural, the appearance is still quite impressive. Those who see it up close say it's really striking. It's not just the painting, but the way they move and act out the story. Is it really just tradition, or is there something more behind this origin? They live on North Sentinel Island in the Bay of Bengal, which is Indian territory, and to this day, the number of inhabitants there remains a total mystery. Estimates range from 50 to 200 Sentinelese people completely isolated from the rest of the world. This isolation isn't recent. There's evidence they've been there for tens of thousands of years with practically no outside contact. And whenever contact does happen, the reaction's almost always aggressive. One of the earliest records was back in 1867 when a ship ran aground near the island. The survivors made it to the beach, but days later, warriors with bows and spears attacked them. They only escaped because they got rescued in time. Decades later, in 1880, a British expedition captured 6 tribe members. The older ones got sick and died soon after. That set off alarm bells that any contact could bring deadly diseases to them. Even so, attempts kept going. In 1974, a documentary crew got close and an arrow wounded one member. Today, the Indian government bans anyone from coming within 5 kilometers of the island. Armed patrols constantly watch the area. And it's not just to protect outsiders, it's also for them because, in the end, this tribe makes it very clear they'd rather be left alone. In this tribe, strength isn't just a quality, it's practically a survival rule. Men grow up amidst constant disputes, often over territory and cattle, which is the community's most valuable asset. One of the most intense rituals is called donga. Basically, it consists of fights with heavy sticks where young men face off until one can no longer continue. This is how they prove their endurance and, in many cases, secure the right to marry. Women also undergo extremely harsh traditions. Many cut their own skin to create raised scars, which are seen as a mark of beauty. The more scars a woman has, the greater her prestige within the tribe. Another well-known custom is the lip plate. The process starts early in childhood and the plate gets gradually enlarged over time. Beyond cultural value, this even influences marriage arrangements. The larger the plate, the larger the amount of cattle demanded as a dowry. In daily life, weapons like old rifles are part of the routine. Conflicts with other tribes still occur, mainly over scarce resources. From an outside perspective, it all seems extreme. But for them, it's what keeps tradition alive and ensures that the next generation remains strong. In Indonesia, there is a tribe that takes the concept of beauty to a completely different level. They are the Mentawai people who live on the island of Siberut near Sumatra. Over there, sharpened teeth are a sign of beauty and strength. The women go through a ritual where their front teeth are filed down until they become pointed, almost like shark teeth, and there is no anesthesia or anything modern involved. They hold onto a piece of banana bark and endure the pain. But it is not just about aesthetics. This process marks the transition into adulthood and shows that the person is ready to take on responsibilities within the community. Each sharpened tooth represents resilience. The men also have their own rituals. From childhood, they start getting tattoos using thorns and simple tools. Throughout their lives, their bodies get marked, indicating important phases and status within the tribe. To get married, for example, a man needs to have practically his entire body tattooed. Even though these practices might seem extreme, the Mentawai have a strong connection with nature. They believe that everything has a spirit, trees, animals, even objects. It might seem strange to us, but for them, every mark on the body tells a story of courage and survival. Now, there's a group that many people don't even know how to properly classify, the so-called Agori in northern India. Today, they are seen as a spiritual order, but the origin is much older. These groups emerged between the 4th and 8th centuries and, over time, ended up living isolated, far from cities, in places like Varanasi. Because of this, many people view them almost as separate communities, with their own customs that have spanned generations. Their lifestyle really stands out. Many live near cremation grounds, cover themselves in ash, and carry objects made from bones. To outsiders, it seems intense, but for them, it's part of a worldview that doesn't separate life and death. One of the most famous moments involving the Agori happened in 2017, when journalist Reza Aslan filmed a documentary for CNN. During the visit, he was covered with human ashes, drank a mysterious liquid from a skull, and took part in rituals that clearly made him uncomfortable. At one point, one of the men even threatened him for talking too much.
Why do
The episode sparked huge controversy and criticism, especially for showing the most extreme side of the Zagors. In the end, this tribe ends up in this strange middle ground. They're not exactly a traditional indigenous tribe, but they don't follow anything close to modern standards either. The Korowai people, deep in the forests of Papua, defy logic with their homes built high up. They construct houses up to 30 or 40 meters off the ground, perched atop giant trees. No exaggeration there. From below, the structures look like tiny platforms lost in the sky. To climb, there's no safe ladder. It's basically a trunk with rough notches cut in. And this isn't just tradition. Living up high protects from floods, insects, and even dangerous animals. It's a survival strategy passed down for generations. Their daily lives also stand out. They hunt with bows and arrows, fish in rivers, and eat whatever the forest gives. Fish, wild boar, even sago larvae are part of their local diet. Everything revolves around nature. No clocks, no rush. Time is marked by hunger, seasons, and river levels. It's not about fearing nature, but facing it in a way very different from the rest of the world. This is the Girawol Festival of the Wodabe, a nomadic people living across Cameroon, Niger, Chad, and northeastern Nigeria. They number somewhere between 160,000 and 200,000 members, holding on to traditions that have barely changed over time. Here, the roles are reversed. It's the men competing for the women's attention. For days, young men prepare with extreme care. They paint their faces with red clay, create patterns with white dots, and darken their lips with deep tones. Everything is designed to make them look more attractive. During the festival, they form lines and begin long, repetitive dances under a heavy heat. The goal is simply to draw attention. They even force smiles and widen their eyes, because white teeth and big eyes are seen as signs of beauty. In the end, 3 women choose the winners. Maybe the strangest part is that in some cases these selections can even result in relationships, even if the person already has another partner. It might seem like just a different contest, but for them it's serious business, a ritual that mixes beauty and tradition, which continues strong to this day, even being so odd to the rest of the world. In a remote region of the Pacific, on the islands of Palau, there exists a story that blends reality and mystery even to this very day. Reports speak of a group known as the Tribe of Giants, people who drew attention for their height far above the average, reaching something between 2 and almost 3 meters tall. The problem is that nearly everything about them is uncertain. Much of what is known comes from ancient tales, passed down from generation to generation. Some say they were descendants of a different lineage, while others believe it could have simply been an adaptation to the island's environment. A discovery in caves in the area made this mystery even stranger. Researchers found human fossils with quite unusual characteristics: skulls smaller than normal, thicker bones, and traits that didn't match the current inhabitants of Palau. This raised a serious doubt. Were they indeed humans with extreme changes or something different? These islands are located hundreds of kilometers from any major continent, which makes everything even harder to explain. How did these people get there, and why did they disappear? To this day, no one has a clear answer, and perhaps that's exactly what makes this story so unsettling. The Hamar tribe, which lives in southern Ethiopia, is a group of people that many folks simply cannot comprehend at first glance. There are approximately 46,000 members of this tribe, and they make their home between mountainous areas and drier regions, raising cattle and planting crops just to survive. But what really draws attention are their rituals. One of the most well-known is the bull jumping ceremony. In it, a young man must run and cross a line of animals without falling. If he manages to do that, he is considered ready to get married. If he fails, he has to try again. Another strange thing that takes place during this ceremony is that the women of the community participate in a physical endurance ritual. They actually ask to be hit with sticks as a way of showing courage and loyalty to their future husband. The marks that remain are seen as symbols of pride within the group. In everyday life, the Hamar also have customs that surprise outsiders who arrive. From the use of clay in their hair to very different social practices, like rituals involving coffee that include spitting out the drink as a way of blessing the surroundings. It might seem strange or even harsh to those of us looking in from outside, but for them, it's just a tradition passed down from generation to generation. In other words, nobody there views this as anything out of the ordinary. In an isolated region of Papua New Guinea, there exists a custom that many people consider one of the most disturbing in the entire world. The so-called Aseks of Angapina live in remote areas, surrounded by mountains and constant fog, where signs from nature are still interpreted as something deeply spiritual. And it is in this very place that a rather unusual ritual emerges, which basically consists of preserving the dead through the use of smoke. What remains of these individuals spends weeks, sometimes even months, being prepared within enclosed structures. Afterwards, they receive a layer of red clay and are then positioned on cliffs or bamboo supports that face the village. The idea is not to hide them away. They remain exposed, almost as if they were still present, observing the daily lives of those who continue living. In one of these locations, 14 mummies were found, organized seated or curled up inside large baskets. Some still retained hair, nails, and even very visible facial features. Reaching this place is also not simple at all. The path is steep, full of mud, and comes with a real risk of falling. One slip could even bring down the entire structure. Today, the ritual has practically disappeared, especially after the arrival of Christianity around 1949. But what remains is still there, frozen in time, raising quite the question. After all, how far does respect for the dead truly go? And when does it become frightening or even unacceptable for those who are still alive? The Mashco-Piro are among the most isolated and unpredictable indigenous peoples in the Amazon. They live in Manu National Park in Peru, especially in the Madre de Dios region near the border with Brazil. They are nomads, surviving on hunting and gathering, and for a long time they avoided any contact with outsiders. And this isolation did not happen by chance. At the end of the 19th century in 1894, a large part of the group was attacked by men linked to Carlos Fitzcarrald, a Peruvian businessman considered the Rubber Baron. After that, many were still forced to work as slaves between 1897 and 1909. Those who survived fled deeper into the forest and have since avoided any approach. Even so, in recent years they have begun to appear more often. In 2007, about 20 members were filmed near the Las Piedras River. In 2013, new recordings showed the group approaching villages, apparently asking for food. And in 2024, images showed dozens of them emerging near logging areas. According to experts, this may be a sign of pressure on their territory. Less food, more invasion, and they end up getting closer to those they always avoided. The tensest part is that contact remains prohibited. For them, even a common illness for us can be fatal. It is not just an isolated tribe, it is a group trying to survive while the world around them gets closer and closer. Deep within a vast forest called the Chaco, situated between Paraguay and Bolivia, live the Ayareo, one of the last isolated peoples outside of the Amazon. And what's frightening in this case isn't just the isolation itself, but rather what's happening all around them. For decades, this group lived as nomadic hunter-gatherers, mastering a dry and challenging environment. They know how to find food where almost no one else possibly could, using plants hidden deep within the thick vegetation. For the vast majority of people, it would be practically impossible to survive the way they do. The problem is that this territory is slowly disappearing. Back in 2004, one Ayareo family made contact with the outside world after bulldozers invaded the area where they were living. They had to flee in a hurry, leaving everything behind. And this was not an isolated incident at all. Companies purchased massive stretches of land in the region and started clearing the forest to raise cattle. The indigenous people themselves call the bulldozers beasts with metal skin. Today, there are still Ayareo groups that avoid any kind of contact. However, with the constant advance of farms and roads, that isolation is increasingly threatened. About them, what's most terrifying is not the tribe itself, but the fact that the world around them could destroy it at any moment. Don't forget to subscribe to watch more videos like this one.